All right, what I wanted to talk about today, actually, it's kind of funny because I had this at the beginning of it last week, so it will seem kind of funny when it ends up on the internet a few days afterwards. But the title of my message is Hira, St. Valentine's, and the Festival of Love. I never preach about holidays. I always say that, and I end up doing it. So I'm going to preach about something. I was just thinking about it the last few weeks. St. Valentine's, it's such a funny time, and I love calling it St. Valentines because it just makes people so mad when it's Valentine. I don't know. My wife gets mad about that. But you know, how much of a heartache does this holiday cause people? I'm serious, and the stress, and I gotta buy something for someone and all this stuff. And it's so funny that you kind of wonder, did they really, when the holiday really started, people really think about how it would affect modern society? Because we get so tied up in little things like Valentine's Day or, this day or that day. And interestingly enough, and this is the joke that I have in my family, is I told my kids we need to call it the happy dismemberment of St. Valentine's Day. Because technically, the church celebrated the martyrdom of St. Valentine on the 14th of February, so today. And so we're basically celebrating this poor guy getting ripped to shreds because of his faith. So, everyone out there, happy dismemberment of St. Valentine's Day. Have a good day. But I don't know, I'm interested in history, and I really started looking into it and trying to figure out, well, where did this really come from? Why do we give Valentine's? Why do we, it's all a love thing and all this stuff? Absolutely has nothing to do with St. Valentine. It really doesn't. The church did some amazing stuff, and I love reading about church history. This book I'm reading, I'm going to check it out. It's called Christianity Through the Centuries. It's an amazing book. But what I think is interesting is the church had this really cool thing that as different cultures and nations began to mix in with Christianity, they would just take some party that these guys would have, like the barbarians. I love it when they refer to them as the barbarians. The barbarians were the guys like the Goths and the Visigoths and all these guys that started coming in and taking over different portions of the Roman Empire. Well, they all had their different practices and different things they did, And the Romans themselves had their own, I love the word pagan. They use the word pagan. That's, their own practices. And there was a 2 or 3 different ceremonies that went on right around February. And one of them that was interesting was on the Athenian calendar, which was the Greek calendar, they had a holiday that was basically to celebrate the marriage of Zeus and Hera. And if around the 14th of February, which is kind of interesting. So, I kind of think that's where the whole thing came from with the love and all this kind of stuff. Because really, even most historians say that there's tons of Valentines that were martyred during, the period of time. It was a very popular name. Like Jason, like John, like Peter, like all these different names. I mean, there were tons of these different people that were named that, and they were martyred, so you can't really point to one person. But the interesting thing about this festival that celebrated the marriage of Zeus and Hera was an interesting character in Greek mythology, and I always kind of like tying in some mythology, because there's most of the cultures, when they wrote the Bible, I mean, they had, they knew all these different mythologies that went around, and Hera was an interesting person because she was very, very selfish. She was a very selfish goddess, right? One time, if you know anything about Greek mythology, but there's a character, Paris, and if you don't know who Paris is, then you have to watch the beautiful Brad Pitt movie. What was it called? The one with him as what's that movie called? It's about the Trojan Wars and everything. Well, anyways, what was it called? I don't remember now. Anyways, but yeah. Okay, so Paris was one of these guys that, was a mighty warrior and all this stuff. And he basically said that Aphrodite was the most beautiful goddess in all the realms of goddesses. And Hera was upset about that. She didn't like people saying she wasn't beautiful. She had a problem. And you read about all the different cults, the Hera cults and all these different things, the people that worship her. She was a very selfish god. Go ahead and turn over to Proverbs 10. Now, Hera was an interesting character in Greek mythology because she was a very selfish god. And it's interesting that, like I said, with St. Valentine's Day, the Festival of Love, being basically that the story of the marriage of Zeus and Hera. Hera's selfishness, and you read about it, she was selfish for human affection. She wanted people to say she was pretty. She wanted gifts. She wanted people to appreciate it. And it's funny, ironic, I guess you could say, that this ends up falling on what we celebrate as Valentine's Day. How much of modern love is just selfishness? Think about that for a second. How much of our ideas of modern love is just selfishness? And I was thinking about this scripture in Proverbs. It's one of those love scriptures that's probably easy to pass over because it's such an easy, simple scripture here. Proverbs 10 is amazing. And honestly, it's worth reading over a few different times. But the scripture I want to point out is verse 12. It says, hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all sins. Hatred stirs up strife. Jesse Duplantis made this statement when we were watching a message from a couple weeks ago, and he said that selfishness brings conflict. You've got hatred, you've got love. What is the real difference between hatred and love? Really, when you think about it. True love is the absolute definition of selflessness. Whereas hatred stems from a selfness, of a selfishness, of a self-centered life. You hate something because it interferes with your life. You wouldn't hate it if it didn't interfere with your life. How many times, and the word hate is such a disgusting word. I mean, it really should be taken out of vocabulary and think about it, because it is a really powerful word. But think about things that you've said you've hated. It's something that made you uncomfortable. It's something, people say, I hate public speaking. You've heard that before. We were just talking about getting people to preach, Come on, everybody can preach in my church. People say, I hate public speaking. Why? Because it makes you uncomfortable, It takes something away. And don't read into anything more like, well, you're being selfish if you don't stand up and preach. I'm not saying that. If somebody's not supposed to preach. Have you ever heard anybody preach that's not supposed to preach? Oh my gosh, it's such a boring. I'm sorry. Anyways, I heard people preach that weren't supposed to preach. I'm sorry. Just let somebody else do it. Write a book or something. No, but hatred stirs up strife. When you have selfishness, when you have something in your life that you're so self-centered that the hatred, it just brings about this strife. The rest of your life just falls into a place of just conflict, anxieties, frustrations. When you are not living in a life that's centered on love, you will constantly live in strife. Love, and it's amazing, the scripture says, love covers sin. And I started looking into that word, and it's interesting, and I thought, well, there has to be something else, because covering sin is always spoken of as being something evil, right? I mean, Proverbs says, man covers sin, but what does that mean? And I looked up the word, and the word is actually kasan in the Hebrew, and it literally means to conceal, to keep out of sight. Kasan, and it's an amazing, the root word, there's all these, where it talks about after Adam and Eve had sinned, that they concealed themselves, they hid themselves, and yet God came to them even in their sin. And I thought about this. True love isn't thrown off by other people's sins. Selfishness are thrown off by what other people do. Selfishness is always self-centered. So if somebody does something you don't like, it throws you off. If somebody does something that bothers you, it throws you off. It's all about you. What makes me happy? I deserve this, or I should have that, or I should, have this thing. But love looks over other people's wrongs. Looks over. It covers it up. It doesn't even care. It doesn't bother them. And I was thinking about this word that the hatred stirs up like a dust storm. That as you live your life in selfishness, it's like you got this dust all around you. All the garbage and all the stuff in life is just constantly bugging you, and you just can't get past it. But love covers over sin. Go ahead and turn over to Romans 8. We'll talk about this. I thought there was a quote that I was reading out of an old Kenneth Hagin book, and he had said this, and I thought this was a really cool thing. He said, isn't it funny how we judge other people by what they do, but we judge ourselves by our good intentions? Isn't that true? We'll judge other people by what we see they do. We don't care about your intentions. You might have intended to say something nice, but calling me fat isn't going to make me feel better about myself, all right? That's what, it was funny. I was telling a story a few nights ago about, gosh, I just get tired of people saying stuff like that, like, oh, look, you look like you put on some weight or something. It's like, no, I haven't. I really haven't. Sorry, I haven't put on any weight. I'm actually healthier than I ever have and exercising more. But, people say, and it's like, well, maybe they intended to say you're not fat, that you're getting bigger, like more muscular. I'm like, whatever. It's not how I took it. But that's how we judge people. We judge people by what they do, but we judge ourselves based upon our good intentions. Oh, well, I intended to do something nice, or my intention wasn't to do, and it's funny that love, when you walk a walk of love, when you're living in love, and honestly, the point of my message, and I'll get to the point of my message today, I've been talking about what we believe, and I believe that out of anything that I can teach, out of anything that we can gain from Jesus' life, is that the most important thing we can do is love, and live a life of love.